Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. It's buses and marbles day. Well, Nicki Manaj, that'll make sense here at some point. Nicki Manaj, the famous rapper with 180 quadrillion followers between Twitter, Instagram, and everything else, did one of the most dangerous things you can do today in America. She expressed a personal opinion and shared an anecdote, and it went against one of the government's grand narratives. Now, what dangerous opinion and anecdote did she express and share? Nicki Manaj shared an anecdote regarding someone's experience with a possible vaccine side effect. Possible one. The friend with the possible adverse reaction wasn't even the point of Manaj's story. Her point was, quote, think for yourself and make your own decision, essentially. That's basically what she said regarding the vaccine. Now, here are the very dangerous words Nicki Manaj tweeted. Quote, my cousin in Trinidad won't get the vaccine because his friend got it and became impotent. His testicles became swollen. This is the first. His friend was weeks away from getting married. Now the girl called off the wedding. Your girl's shady, bro. So just pray on it and make sure you're comfortable with your decision, not bullied. End quote. First off, okay, she can share a story if she wants to. Nicki Manaj knows somebody whose, beans swelled up after getting the vax. And so she tweets that she wonders if it's possibly connected to the vax. Again, who cares? We used to just be like, oh, I read an opinion. Okay. So now we have these pathetic people in everyone's lives that feel the need to freak out if you tweet or if someone like Nicki Minaj tweets something that they dislike. So here we are, collectively losing our ever-loving minds. The White House even weighed in on this. The health minister of Trinidad actually addressed this, like actual politicians. But I guess apparently Nicki Minaj's tweet was a bridge too far. See, when it comes to getting vaccinated, you're not allowed to even ask a question about it. Certainly, you cannot ask that question publicly. And I dare say if you ask it privately, somebody will probably knock at your door, operate in your living room at this point. I don't know. And you definitely cannot ask these questions when you're a major public figure and you have 1,011,000 followers on social media like Nicki Minaj. So, of course, Joy Reid of MSNBC, I guess she needed a thirst quencher. I don't know. She just needed to use Nicki Minaj as a way to get attention because I don't think her show's rated well. She jumped all over Minaj, and Joy Reid just was not happy. She attacked her. She smeared her. She also presented her as being anti-vax, which I just showed you the tweet. Does it sound like somebody who's anti-vax? That's rhetorical. The answer is no. So, of course, to the surprise of no one, Minaj was then represented by MSNBC and Joy Reid, and a Twitter fight ensued. Reid didn't make it out of that one, as Nicki Minaj rightfully dragged her and won because, this was ridiculous. I can't even believe that we're at this point. It was fun to watch, though. I'm not going to lie. So, for one, Reid and everybody else like her said that Minaj was promoting vaccine hesitancy. So these vax bullies were saying that Minaj was promoting vaccine hesitancy and that Minaj was anti-vax. Except Nicki Minaj didn't say that she was scared or worried. She simply relayed an anecdote, and then she encouraged people to just not be bullied. She even told them to pray on it. Just waiting for the Church of Satan to jump on that one. Who else is left? And even if she had promoted something other than full compliance, Whiskey, Tango, Foxtrot are any of these people, any of these critics to control this grown woman's speech? That's one. Two, Minaj had followed up her original remark, like minutes after, by tweeting that she will likely get vaccinated to go on tour, something that was entirely left out of everybody's criticism. So responding to a fan, Minaj had tweeted, quote, a lot of countries won't let people work without the vaccine. I'd recommend they get the vaccine. They have to feed their families. I'm sure I'll be vaccinated as well because I have to go on tour, end quote. So Nicki Minaj was recommending that people get the vaccine since people often need it to work. And maybe she shared that she's planning on possibly getting vaxxed herself. Sure doesn't sound anti-vax to me, but as you know, even the slightest bit of concern, anecdote, or question about this vaccine is disallowed from the vax bullies. So the vaccine bullies say that you have to parrot the party line. You have to parrot the bully line. It's safe. It's effective. It is the safest vaccine ever produced, ever, period. It's made from magic and ground up unicorn horns. It is the way out of the pandemic. In fact, it's the only way out. Ever. If you question anything I just said, like Nicki Minaj, you will receive the full wrath of not only the vaccine bully rage brigade, but you'll also be called out by the media. And like I said, even our clown government itself. This is we are literally, I think this planet is now officially sponsored by Brawndo. It's what plants crave. We are in the idiocracy portion of the human timeline. Now, Nicki Minaj also did something else that you're not supposed to do. On top of thinking for herself and sharing an anecdote, she also did something that vaccine bullies, the Marxist left, the rage mob, they will not abide. She found common ground with someone on the right. So now a decade ago, if I played a video of the future, and in this video of the future, Nicki Minaj posted a segment of Tucker Carlson that she liked on her Twitter feed, you would have assumed that I slipped a tab of acid into your latte. But such are the crazy times in which we live. The internet was apoplectic because Nicki Minaj shared a video of Tucker Carlson defending her. Didn't Minaj know, screamed the rage mob, that Carlson is a white supremacist because he isn't a Democrat? Vaccine bullies were outraged that Nicki Minaj had dared to share an anecdote and that she had acknowledged a Republican television host. Republicans are the devil. They're all racist, all of them, even the baby ones. They're all maggots. M-A-G-A-T-S, I think. Isn't that how they spell it? They're people who take horse dewormer. They drink water, which horses also drink. They're incredibly dangerous because, like Nicki Minaj, they're not a part of the hive mind. The Borg, the modern day Borg. I mean, that's where we're at. The leftist hive mind cannot tolerate original thought or dissent of any kind. Remember, the formation of any common ground is viewed as a betrayal by the Marxist left. Common cause is forbidden because it represents a threat to groupthink and ultimately their control. So as it turns out, Nicki Minaj wasn't having it. So she tweeted this, quote, here we go, marbles and buses. Right, I can't speak to, agree with, even look at someone from a particular political party. People aren't human anymore. If you're black and a Democrat, if you're black and a Democrat tells you to shove marbles up your double snakes, you simply have to. If another party tells you to look out for that bus, stand there and get hit, end quote. So she's absolutely, actually, she's right. Regardless of how you like her presentation of it, she's absolutely 11 trillion % correct. The status hive mind expects black people to do what they're told. They expect women to do what they're told. They expect gay people to do what they're told. They expect Hispanics to do what they're told. Because anything that is different about you is trademarked by the Marxist left. They believe that they have trademarked who you are, what you believe, what you think, what you do behind closed doors. And as a result of that, they have some ownership in you. And you're not allowed to be anything else but Democrat, and you can't do anything else but what they tell you to do. Even if it means that you stand there and get hit by a bus. The historical party of slavery, they still love barking orders at people. They still expect full compliance from every minority, it turns out. And sadly, there are millions of like cultists out there. I know Nancy Pelosi was referring to the GOP as being cultist earlier. There are cultists that agree with us. I mean, we've heard of cults, right? The Jim Jones, the David Koresh, the Manson family. We know that the hallmark of a cult is the complete closing of the mind, the inability to think for oneself, the embracing of radical ideology. It's defined by the absence of thought, replaced by total obedience. And we're used to cult phenomena happening in small groups, except for the Jim Jones thing, I guess. But we're witnessing like mass hysteria right now. It's a mass psychosis. It's happening to hundreds of millions of people all at once. Sidebar, thank you, Fox High School, for having a class on mass hysteria in high school, because I took that class as an elective on the side because I didn't want to take art. And oh my gosh, that class taught me more than anything else. And I don't think they even offer it anymore, which is sad. But back to the show. All of this is disturbing, very much so. And Minaj reflected on this cult phenomena. She posted this on Instagram Live last night. Watch.
You can't speak for the fear of the mob attacking you. If that doesn't give you chills up and down your spine, this is scary. You should be able to ask questions about anything you're putting inside your body. Do y'all realize that I remember going to China and they were telling us, you cannot speak out against, the people in power there, etc. And I remember all of us thinking, oh, okay, well, we understand and we respect the laws here and that it's so different where we live. But don't y'all see what's happening? Don't y'all see that we are living now in that time where people will turn their back on you, not agreeing, but people will isolate you if you simply speak and ask a question.
Where's the lie? She is 1,000% right. We've been watching this chilling of speech and the censorship grow incrementally for the past 5 years, and it's accelerating. You can't even have the former president of the United States speak on social media. And now you have a music superstar, somebody who's a hip hop artist, she's a businesswoman, she can't even ask a question or share an anecdote about a possible adverse effect of, or even ask a question about a possible adverse effect of any kind of vaccine technology that everyone is being told that they have to take or they're a mass murderer. Now, according to Manaj's Instagram account, her Twitter account was temporarily suspended. So you call that Twitter jail, right? Sometimes they'll suspend you for a couple of days, sometimes it's 7 days, sometimes they put you in Twitter jail and you have to remove an offending tweet in order to access your Twitter account. I know something about that. And Twitter denies this. But I'm gonna tell you something. I find Nicki Manaj, I will trust this woman every day, more so than I will ever trust Twitter. Nicki Manaj never suspended my account or thousands of other accounts. I simply wrote about how big tech handled a New York Post story on big tech suppression of that New York Post Hunter Biden story. And they suspended my account. They suspended thousands of people's account. They told me that I had shared hacked materials when I was literally writing about how they were treating media and conservatives. So it was entirely ridiculous. And then later they said they did all of this in error. But you know what? They still hold it against me, and I can't be a part of their little Tweety Bird fact check squad as a result of that. Do you know that? So on top of asking a question, Manaj also did a very bad wrong thing because she found, like I said, common cause with Tucker Carlson. That's prohibited. Maybe now more of America will wake up and realize what is happening. We have started the descent into tyranny. We are in an American revolution right now that is very similar to the Mao Cultural Revolution in China, which carried that country into full-on communism. The hallmark of cultural revolutions is controlling of speech and canceling of people who dissent. And they do this because tyrannical rulers and governments, they don't want any challenge to their authority. And they don't want to ask you for your consent for what they intend to do. And that's because usually you're not going to like what they're going to do and you're going to speak out about it and they're not going to like that. They're not going to allow you. Their worldview and their rules are going to be imposed regardless, which means they have to control the dialogue, dissent of any kind, even a question that threatens their control. Tyrannical governments want above all else to make you feel like you are alone in your dissent. They want to isolate you. They want you to feel cut off from everyone else because then you're easier to target. And that's why they shame you and attempt to erase you. And that's why you should stand with people who they try to shame for no reason at all. Nicki Manaj mentioned China and how in China, the communist government forbids you to speak out against the party. Just to give a glimpse of where this is going, I want to show you what the CCP does, Communist Chinese Party, what they do to any citizen who doesn't do exactly what they're told. So this is Zhao Wei. She's she's basically the Reese Witherspoon of China, from what I understand, and Witherspoon has like her company that she does. So this actress, famous actress, worth billions of dollars. She's really, really smart about finances and investments, and she has all these other businesses in addition to acting, singing, directing, producing. Well, for all intents and purposes, she no longer exists in China. Not kidding. What do I mean? Well, Zhao Wei has millions of adoring fans, and she's worth billions, like I said, but she has been entirely erased from history in China. And their government officials, the CCP, refuses to say why. Now, the CCP controls the internet, the news, all forms of communication, film, television, everything, music. They have what they call unpersoned her. And they've done that by literally removing her name from the internet and everything else that it's ever appeared on. If you even look at movies that she's directed and you look at where her name was listed in the credits, they have removed her name from all these movies that she produced, directed, and even starred in, and all they leave behind is just a line, a dash. Now, the CCP will not say what she's done. I mean, it's pretty clear, though, that she ticked them off. The only thing that everybody can assume is that her production company, had hired an actor from Taiwan for a film that she released in 2016, or that they started filming in 2016. Now, as you know, Beijing does not acknowledge the sovereignty of Taiwan. In fact, I was trying to get banned by China by arguing with one of their mouthpieces today. That's my goal in life. I want the communists over there to ban me. Come on, you cowards. And they do not like Taiwan's claim of sovereignty. And they're kind of saber-rattling about maybe perhaps taking it back by force. Beijing not only overturned Zhao Wei's decision to hire a Taiwanese actor, but they erased her existence as penalty for doing so. And she is far from the only one. There are other actors and actresses, musicians, business people. I mean, I love how this is now a verb. They disappeared Jack Ma, the guy who owns Alibaba. The CCP doesn't care how rich you are, how well known you are, or how powerful you think you are. They will lock you away, re-educate you, and not allow you to go back out into the public until you toe the CCP line. This is how tyrannical governments have to maintain control. They control narrative, speech, and people. Nobody knows where Zhao Wei is at the moment. She just kind of disappeared. You know, I mentioned Jack Ma. I mean, there's so many other people that this has happened to. Is this where America's heading? Yes. You can't ask questions. You can't be friends. You can't even mention a point of view of somebody else who opposes the state's narratives. You can't question anything. You can't find common cause. Nicki Manaj can clearly see what's happening. And of course, every cult has a cult leader, some even mass cults. Like you have cult of personality, Dr. Fauci. And Living Color wrote a song about guys just like this. He was also, by the way, named Sexiest Man Alive by The Guardian. Of course, that article had to have been written by garden gnomes. And he was asked, I mean, they were all weighing in. He was asked to weigh in on what we are now, I cannot even believe this, what we now call #Ballgate. Watch.
The answer to that, Jake, is a resounding no. There's no evidence that it happens, nor is there any mechanistic reason to imagine that it would happen. So the answer to your question is no.
How can health authorities even attempt to combat this kind of misinformation coming from somebody who is a huge and beloved international star like Nicki Minaj?
It's very difficult. There is a lot of misinformation, mostly on social media, and the only way we know to counter mis and disinformation is to provide a lot of correct information and to essentially debunk these kinds of claims, which, may be, innocent on her part. I'm not, blaming her for anything, but she should be thinking twice about propagating information that really has no basis except a one-off anecdote. And that's not what science is all about.
She's a rapper! You know what he should have said? This is what I would have said. I would have looked right at Tapper and I would have said, are you kidding me? You're asking me about Ballgate? Why don't you sit here and ask me about, I don't know, the fact that just last week the NIH commissioned a study to determine how the vaccine affects lady bits and the menstruation cycles, the baby factory, how that all gets done. And in fact, in Britain, the BBC just announced yesterday that they're doing the same thing now because thousands of women are reporting this. Maybe, Jake, you could ask a question about that, but no. You want to talk about Franken beans. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. All right, I'm your Huckleberry. Let's talk about it. Stupid. This is so dumb. It's like I feel this is why people day drink, because of this stuff right here. The sexiest man alive. Again, was it written by garden gnomes? By the way, I have to point out that Fauci being named that from The Guardian, this is proof that we're suffering from mass psychosis. Maybe the virus affects our ability to now also gauge sex appeal, because apparently we are stupid people, ready to be ruled by even stupider people in Washington. So bad that the White House offered to talk or have her talk to a doctor, to Nicki Manaj, to make sure she didn't have any different opinions than the one that she is allowed to have. No word on whether or not Nicki's dialed up the sexiest man alive. Gosh, what did that word ever do to you to redefine it like that? She'll learn more about enlarged testicles and their possible connection to the vax. I mean, can I just stop for a minute? She literally just shared a story. She's not a scientist. If we're going to treat her as one, then I demand to be called Dr. Dana from now on forever. We're going to change the name of the show. I'm not even kidding you. I would love to be, by the way, a fly on the wall for that conversation that Manaj would have with anybody at the White House on this. This is what she had to say about the White House invitation. She said, quote, "The White House has invited me and I think it's a step in the right direction. Yes, I'm going. I'll be dressed in all pink like Legally Blonde so they know I mean business. I'll ask questions on behalf of the people who've simply been made fun of for being human," end quote. Ballgate. We'll see. Well, first off, I have to say that the White House said, "Oh, we didn't invite her to the White House. She can talk to a doctor about her questions." How petty is that? You know what? This is how Taliban overtook Afghanistan, because the White House was too busy being petty and stupid. And then you have Don Lemon of CNN, who quickly condescended to Manaj. Lemon tweeted this, quote, "A source tells CNN that Nicki Manaj was offered a conversation with a doctor to clarify the efficacy and side effects of the vaccine, not a visit to the White House. A White House statement is coming shortly, sponsored by Brondo. It's what plants crave." Ignore Lemon. And again, good for Nicki Minaj. Now, since government stupidity is a virus that transcends all borders, we had to bring you this. Guys, I swear to you, hands to sky, this happened. The Trinidad government, their health minister had to weigh in. They needed to let you know what they thought about Nicki Minaj's cousin's testicles and their possible connection to any kind of vaccine. They are serious people who take Nicki Minaj's cousin's testicles very seriously. And they have been very busy searching Trinidad for enlarged gonads. That rhymed. Watch.
As far as we know, at this point in time, there has been no such reported either side effect or adverse event. And what was sad about this is that it wasted our time yesterday trying to track down, because we take all these claims seriously, whether it's on social media or mainstream media. As we stand now, there is absolutely no reported such side effect or adverse event of testicular swelling in Trinidad, or I dare say, Dr. Hines, anywhere else? None that we know of anywhere else in the world.
I'm so glad that they had to talk about this. They deserve it for being so dumb. What's sad about this whole affair, of course it wasted your time, because it's stupid, is that the Trinidad government, Trinidad and Tobago, they feel like they had to make a big deal about this. This is clownsmanship. None of these people are anybody with any authority to tell you what you can or cannot say. This is a time, by the way, when if you want to protect free speech, you got to engage in it and exercise it. This is the fight against their forced compliance. So good on Minaj for just saying what she thought, for encouraging discussion. I don't care if you don't like her songs or if you don't like how she represents herself to young women. Right now, the fight is against forced coercion. And it's going to take a lot of people. And good for her to remind people that they have every right to make their own vaccine decisions, and to hell with the internet rage mob that says otherwise. Let's hope America wakes up. You're not free if you're not free to ask questions, to think critically, and to speak your mind. There's a reason it's the first and most important right in the Bill of Rights. And there's a reason why the second backs it. In times like these, we need to all exercise that right more. Do not be bullied and do not back down. The more they rage against you, the more you know that you're over the target. People over the target get the flack. And you never know who's going to turn out to be brave in a time of tyranny and censorship. It's not always who you expect, but we hope Minaj's actions inspire more people to freely speak their minds, to ask questions, speak concerns, and not apologize for it. Because, as Nicki Minaj said, to do these things is simply being human and free. Coming up, the border breakdown is coming. You know, the virus doesn't exist down there. Former acting DHS secretary and the best named person on planet Earth, Chad Wolf, will join us to talk about it next. Keep it here. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company, and they serve premium coffee to people who love America and talk about whatever they want to talk about. even Franken beans. They develop their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus that they've learned while serving our great nation. And with every purchase that you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. So in 2020, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. And their high quality coffee beans are imported all the way from Colombia and Brazil. They carefully roast them at their facilities in Tennessee and Utah. And they have a signature roast called Lava Panther. Sounds awesome. It's directly sourced from a small farm in Guatemala. So although the temperatures are not cooling off in Texas at all, but we're pretending that they are, I bought a cinnamon candle. Don't forget to keep enjoying the great outdoors fueled by Black Rifle Coffee. And the best way to do it is to buy it. Get some. And when you join their coffee club, which is the best way, your chosen brew is roasted, packaged, and shipped right to your door. And you'll also get special discounts, gain access to exclusive products, and tons of other things. Purchase at blackriflecoffee.com/Dana. Use code Dana at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. According to the Heritage Foundation's Homeland Security team, the number of illegal entrants who crossed the border totaled, and this was just the month of August, over 200,000. It was somewhere around 208,000. Obviously, this is not sustainable. Something's going to break. I don't know if any of you have seen any of the images that came from Bill Malugin just a little earlier today. That's in the Del Rio sector. It's unbelievable. Looked like a festival. Joining me now to discuss is Chad Wolf, former acting DHS secretary and chairman for the America First Policy Institute Center for Homeland Security and Immigration, and visiting fellow for the Heritage Foundation. Chad, thanks so much for being here. Good to see you. I've got to get your reaction to some of the footage that we have seen just over the past couple of days. Bill Malugin, who's with Fox LA, had sent a drone over. He was in the Del Rio sector, and right there at that international highway, there were several thousand people. And when I have to be honest, when I first was this morning scrolling through, looking on social media, I saw the image alone without any context. And I thought it was a festival that I didn't know about because I didn't hear anybody screaming about masks or vaccines. Come to find out, it's at the border. So apparently that's okay. Thousands of people, hundreds of thousands just for August alone. Where are all of these people going? I can't imagine everyone's getting a date with an immigration judge.
Well, they're certainly not. And thanks for having me on. A lot of these folks are being, as we said, caught and then released into the interior of the country, particularly minors and family units. We know more and more of those individuals are arriving every single month, August being some of the highest numbers of those that they've encountered thus far. So the vast majority of these folks overwhelmingly are being released into American communities. And it's just sad. The images that you talked about are both remarkable and painful all at the same time. Thousands and thousands of individuals under a bridge waiting to be processed. And why are they waiting outside in hot weather in Texas? Because the Biden administration has broken the system. The system's not designed to allow this many of individuals into the country at once, and they don't have the people or the facilities to process them. So instead of adhering to the rule of law, enforcing the rule of law on that border, we're back to catch and release, which we know was just a failure during the Obama administration.
Yeah, very much so. I saw a photo earlier, speaking with Chad Wolf, I saw a photo earlier of a 2-year-old and a 2-year-old girl and a 3-month-old boy. And they had been dumped on the banks there by the Rio, and they were hidden in the tall grass. Nobody knows how long they had been there. A Border Patrol agent just happened to see her pink pants, and that caught his eye. Thank heavens he stopped. They were alone. No one was with them. What happens to these these are infants. What happens to babies that are abandoned there like that? Where do they go? How does that work when they're left alone?
Well, it's just tragic. So they are transferred over to the custody of Health and Human Services. They go to shelters, and then they are picked up by sponsors here in the U.S. And what that is you see families today, and that photo is probably a good illustration of this, separating themselves today because they know that if they get to the border or they push their children across the border, the children will have a better chance of staying here than the adults do. And so this administration is causing thousands and thousands of families to self-separate themselves prior to reaching that border. And it's devastating because for every picture that we see like that, there's probably dozens more that don't make it to the border or unfortunately come into some very bad circumstances. along the way as well.
Two things that were new to me that I've learned in listening and reading what Border Patrol has been saying, and of course people who are living in these border areas, is that one, a lot of these people who are trying to enter illegally, they're coming from further and further away. And the thought on that is that maybe that's the drug cartel just adding to their cash reserves by bringing in more people. And then the second thing was that the time span that we usually see a peak and then that peak falls off, the peak crossing season, I guess, for the lack of a better way to put it, that's remained constant. There hasn't been any kind of drop-off period. What can you tell us about this?
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, usually what we see in the very hot months of the summer, June, July, and August, is a smaller flow of individuals coming to the U.S., and that's been exactly the opposite this summer. You've seen more people in July than you did in June. And then the number of people in August is almost the same as July. And it's because they know our system, they know our laws, they know our practices better than we do. So if you don't change, if you don't innovate, and you don't start applying a consequence to the illegal behavior, you're going to see them coming and keep coming. And that's unfortunately what we see today. To your other point, I think it's very important. Usually the biggest flow is Mexicans and others from Central America and the Northern Triangle. But what we see is the other category, which is how Border Patrol talks about it. We're seeing those numbers increase month after month after month. And so you saw about 9,000 other demographics or other nationalities cross that border in January of this year. In August of this year, over 61,000 individuals crossed from countries that weren't Mexico or the Northern Triangle. And so I think that's very concerning because now others are catching on around the world. Cartels are recruiting folks from different parts of the world because they know they have an open sign to get across the border there along our southwest border.
Unbelievable. And of course, we're not able to actually vet and verify the identity of everyone who's coming across the border. And apparently this is also coming up with a lot of the refugees that have been transported to the United States from Afghanistan after they were able to finally get out of Kabul. I read a story this morning where it was reported that there was another person, basically a felon, a predator of women who apparently was found at one of these places where they're holding these refugees as they vet everyone. This individual was able to get on the flight and get out, and yet we left allies and SAVs and Americans there. What can you tell us about this, and what are the determinations made, kind of a two-parter, to where people are being sent when they are brought over?
Well, that's exactly right. I think whether you look at the border or you look at Afghanistan, if you're going to have a chaotic process, trying to process thousands and thousands of individuals in a short period of time, the system is going to break down, whether that's the processing that's done along that southwest border or the vetting that usually takes months and even years to do. In the case of Afghanistan, it will break down if you try to process that many folks in a very chaotic time period. And it's very, very unfortunate. So I think, as we go forward, these individuals need to be processed. They need to be vetted. If you're coming from Afghanistan, they should be vetted in a third-party country before they arrive here in the U.S. We should not be vetting them on the back end. We should not be paroling the vast majority of these folks in. Usually, if you parole individuals into the country, it's for very specific circumstances, and you need to vet them, and we don't see that occurring today, which is just, again, very concerning. But I would say if you go back to the pictures along the border, you see those thousands of folks underneath that bridge. Vast majority of those are not required to get testing. They're not required to get a vaccine, and they're not even required to be quarantined before they're let onto buses, trains, and airplanes to go to places inside this country. So the administration talks on one side about vaccine mandates, but then if you look at these pictures, there are no mandates here. And these individuals are going to every community across the country.
And for people to realize, if you or I were to leave the country and come back in, and I know that this is the rule for airplanes, but I think these people, the people who are illegally entering, they're put on planes as well. You have to present a negative test. And if you're positive, you have to go through this whole quarantine process if you're even allowed on the plane to leave the country in the first place. But at the border, there are no such mandates. It's almost like the pandemic doesn't exist if you're down in any of these hot sectors, Del Rio, RGV. It doesn't matter. No inconsistency. So it's kind of hard to take people seriously when they say to follow the science, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. And I think that's why this administration continues to get very, very poor marks on its handling of the border and the crisis on the border. Again, they continue to ensure that there's a COVID crisis, a humanitarian crisis, as well as a national security crisis, because they continue just to try to process these individuals month after month after month in the hopes that the numbers will go down. And as long as you're going to process and you're going to try to build more facilities, you're going to see more and more people coming until you start addressing the issue and holding people accountable for coming here illegally. That is the issue. We have ports of entry. We have legal ways to come into this country. We have over 70 different visas that individuals can come into the U.S. on. But if you choose to break the law, there needs to be a consequence to that. And we just unfortunately do not see the Biden administration imposing that consequence.
Worse and worse, and it's awful for the kids that we were talking about that are being put through this in the name of a false compassion. Just awful. Chad Wolf with the America First Policy Institute. Thank you so much, Chad. Appreciate what you do and for joining us today. Mm-hmm. All right, folks, coming up, you've likely noticed a number of things. First off, an increase in your grocery bill. You can thank supply chain disruptions for that. And what about Newsom winning California? Did you see within 24 hours, he also implemented a new requirement for LA County? Yes, vaccine mandates. You got to have a vaccine to go in any of the restaurants, bars, any big events, anything like that. To discuss all of this, Chef Andrew Gruel joins us to break it down next. How much equity do you have in your home? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity they have, the greater the chance criminals could target them. Home title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes, and Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is warning homeowners that they could potentially be victims and not even know it. So cyber thieves search hundreds of public databases looking for high equity homes. They find your home's online title, forge your signature, stating that you sold your home, and then they take out loans with your equity. Insurance and common identity theft programs are not going to cover you. Protect your most valuable asset and register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim. Receive a complete title history of your home, a $100 value, free. Visit HometitleLock.com. Supply chain disruptions are growing, which means food shortages, rising prices, inflation, and then, of course, in California, Gavin Newsom survived a recall, and within 24 hours, LA County gets slapped with a vaccine mandate. You have to show proof of that to get into any restaurants that have now just recently opened, and we're hoping to survive longer after the pandemic. Goodness, it's restaurants, bars, big establishments, outdoor events, sporting events, games, anything like that. Poor Californians. Chef Andrew Gruel, owner of the Slapfish restaurant from California. He joins us now to discuss where this all is headed and if it's going to get worse before it gets better. Chef, as always, so good to see you. Appreciate your time. I know you're busy and you're running around. I was listening to a press conference just end of last week where someone from the administration was saying, well, if you look, historically, if you take away the increase in cost of basically our food and fuel, then it's more towards a historical norm when talking about the increase in inflation, which I thought that's kind of what is affecting everyone. That's why everybody's worried, because they're looking at all of this. But the crazy thing is that we really don't have this labor shortage is all artificial, and it's all contributing to this. Talk to us a little bit about this, because being in the food service industry, being a chef, being in restaurants, this affects you a little bit more intimately, more so than anybody.
It certainly does. And keep in mind, we're dealing with perishable product. So our products can go bad, and our loss rate is, of course, going to increase. And we're seeing that, related, of course, now in California. What's going to happen? Are there going to be lockdowns? I digress. But back specifically to what you brought up, which is great. In the restaurant industry, we have what's known as the prime cost, and that's food and labor. And it makes up roughly 60 to 70% of all of your sales or your purchases, right? So if you look at every dollar you bring in, 60 to 70 cents is going to go toward, and that's the lion's share. That's the bulk of absolutely everything that goes into the business. Now, if I inflate that by 10%, if I'm running a 70% food cost, 77% food cost, that's all my margins. I'm totally in the red now. I've lost it. I'm losing money, hand over fist.
Yeah. I don't know how restaurants are surviving on that. I mean, they can't.
No, they can't, right? So right now it's just a game of kicking debt down the road. what's going to fix that is an open economy, because we need sales in order to survive. Sales solves everything. And a simple 5% increase or decrease in sales can really affect those break-even points. So if we aren't able to operate at full capacity and there's nothing offsetting that, and I'm not asking for subsidies, but if there is nothing, which there is not, then we're screwed.
Yeah, no, and then of course now with the election that just happened, the recall election not working out well, it wasn't successful in California. Within 24 hours of Newsom defending his position, there is this mandate, the vax mandate for LA County at least. A lot of restaurants there though, a lot of businesses who they were, thankfully were able to survive and make it through the lockdown, but now they have to deal with being bouncers, so to speak, and asking people to show their papers if they want to enter their establishments. That is such a bad position to place these people in.
Well, let's just take all of the opinion surrounding a vaccine passport aside. Let's just throw that to the wayside, right? And let's look at the operational or the logistical effect. As on or vaccine cards, when I already am understaffed because right now labor isn't available for all the reasons we talked about in the past. So now I need this extra position. I don't know how to train for that person. I don't know what contingencies are in place if perhaps somebody says no, right? So there's so many things to figure out. That's going to cost me money. We're just trying to survive right now, and now we're having all of these responsibilities thrown on our shoulders, and that could be the straw that breaks the camel's back, to use the cliche.
Oh boy. Well, we're going to be watching to see how all of that comes out, but I have to say I'm not incredibly confident. It's so sad to see, because I know how hard people have been working and how much people have been wanting to support these restaurants. Chef Andrew Gruel, we appreciate it. We know you're on a tight schedule.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us so much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
All right, folks, coming up. Eventually, everyone will be made to comply. We've been talking about the forced compliance, right? So United Airlines, this is the latest business that has made a decision about what they're going to do with vaccination mandates. So they've decided to put their staff, any staff, on temporary leave without pay if they do not get a vaccination. Now, this completely excludes natural immunity if you already had the virus. We'll talk more about that next. So you might have noticed something. The culture of intolerance is making its way to you. Now, more and more, it seems that we're all being forced to comply with things against our will, to say things that we don't believe, to go along with ideas that we don't really trust, to put things in our bodies that we still have lingering questions about that haven't been answered. And we've all heard of cancel culture, of course. We've seen comedians and professors and corporate leaders and celebrities, everybody, so many people shouted down for having the wrong political opinion or saying the wrong thing. So many people have been canceled, often for just the smallest of offenses or no offense at all. And once canceled, that person often loses their ability to earn a living or even have good standing in society. How Maoist. This culture of intolerance that forces compliance comes in many forms. And for a long time, it probably felt like this culture of intolerance was a long way off, a phenomenon that wouldn't affect you. This canceling thing, it happens to other people. But as you've seen, even with the Nicki Manaj story, nobody is safe from these intolerant attacks anymore. Which brings me to these vaccine mandates. The culture of forced compliance is making its way to your neighborhood and your household. 80 million people are suddenly at risk of having their entire livelihoods canceled by vaccine mandates enforced by the private sector. The latest is United Airlines. They announced suddenly that they are going to put anyone who is not vaccinated due to either a religious or health exemption on unpaid leave. Watch.
So for all of our customer-facing employees, so a pilot, a flight attendant, a gate agent, anyone that a customer would interact with, for those exemptions, we're going to work to find some other places for people to work. But alternatively, they're going to go on temporary leave on September 28th until we get to a point where we think COVID is enough that it's safe for them to be back in the workforce.
Doesn't matter if they have natural immunity or not. Science. Listening to United CEO Scott Kirby, you would think that forcing loyal employees, many who served the company for decades, right to the sidelines without any pay, you think that would cause Kirby to lose a little sleep. But he seems totally fine with it. I mean, after all, both the unvaxxed and vaxxed spread the virus. And is there any exemption for natural immunity? No. Studies show that those with natural immunity are protected just like the vax, perhaps even better, according to some studies, but no one seems to care or talk about it. Can't ask questions. United Airlines claims that it will find a job for its unvaccinated employees away from customers. I'm pretty skeptical about that, though. I mean, after all, airlines are in the business of moving and being around people. And we should point out that this policy isn't backed by science. It's backed by forced compliance and a spirit of intolerance that seems to be everywhere you turn in America today. But it's not just United Airlines. Thousands of companies are doing this to their employees, many of whom loyally served when there was no vaccine. I remember the beginning of this pandemic. It was, people had so many questions. Nobody knew what was going on. There was so much unknown. And so many flight attendants and pilots, they still showed up, just like the teachers and the police and so many others. And the people who work in hospitals, they did their job. Their repayment? Well, if they're unvaxxed and they work for United Airlines, unpaid leave and never being allowed to work in front of customers unless they comply with that mandate against their will, well, then they gotta go. Many will buckle under this pressure. There are bills to pay, they got kids to raise, and it's understandable. Everybody's red line is different. But you should be troubled as a nation. We all should. Yet it doesn't seem like a lot are. Enough are, but are there? Instead, this culture of intolerance and forced compliance, it's growing, and it's no longer happening to someone else. It's happening to your neighbor, your friend, your family member. And if it hasn't already, it may soon happen to you. It's time to speak up and push back against this ugly culture of intolerance and forced compliance. And you know what I would do, honestly? I would ask an employment attorney. I would find something that qualifies you under the American Disabilities Act. And if any company tries to sideline you, you can cite your ADA exception. And if they still do it, sue them for everything they have, including their birth certificate. It's time to be very difficult. It's in your American DNA. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.